Hello, everybody. So glad to continue the conversation with you this week. Again, we have another exciting guest, which I'm sure everybody who's watching this knows, or if you're new to Star Trek Adventures, you're going to end up knowing eventually. We're going to gush a lot today because we're really happy to have our guest. Before we go there, I'm Michael Dismuke. I'm a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures and, of course, a blogger on Continuing Missions, which is the #1 fan site for Star Trek Adventures RPG. And let me introduce our fantastic co-host, Jim Johnson.
Hey, everybody. Jim Johnson. I am the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG, published by Modiphius Entertainment. And I'm super excited to be here tonight. I want to introduce our guest, BC Holmes. Please introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm BC Holmes. I'm currently the maintainer of the Star Trek Adventures character creator application. And I don't have numbers to back this up, but maybe I'm the #2 fan site for Star Trek Adventures. I don't know.
You might be actually, if we're going to get technical, you might actually be the #1.
I don't think so.
I think people reference your site way more than Continuing.
Oh, no. You guys, you're big.
I don't know. I see a lot of the pass-throughs. See, I see the pass-through numbers. Plus, I think people bookmark you and go past us. So for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, and if you're on visual right now, I'm just going to go ahead and share screen so that you can go ahead and see what we're talking about. And I'm going to go ahead and gush for a moment. May I, BC?
Sure.
Okay. So when this came out, most of you who are watching this know Continuing Missions, where we post anything and everything from fans and creators about Star Trek Adventures. But we're going to talk today about how BC developed this, what inspired BC to do this, and pushing buttons. I mean, I could push buttons on this all day. We even had an entire episode, Session 0, with Scott Pearson, who's, of course, the huge editor for Simon & Schuster Star Trek books and for Modiphius, who created a character using this system. But the fact that BC designed it with the LCARS interface that you can press through and it incorporates everything so far, I think almost everything Modiphius has published in order to help you create your character, your starship, or even your space sector. So we're going to get into this today. Jim, did you want to add anything before we start interviewing and getting into the mind of BC?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we want to go into a whole lot of detail, but I want to make sure that we just shout out Christopher Lundberg, who was the first person who created the tool initially. And then just through a circle, or not circle, but just through, life had to hand it off to someone else, look for someone else for a while. And I believe that if I remember the history right, BC picked it up and moved on from there. But I just want to make sure that we acknowledge that Christopher was the first one who actually was the fan who put the initial thing together. I want to give credit to all the fans where credit is due. And so I know we're standing on Christopher's shoulders, and BC, of course, has taken a light year, ahead of where it was, as you do. But props to Christopher for getting it kicked off.
Okay, BC, tell us that story. I don't want to miss anybody, so go ahead, tell us that story.
So I think it was probably somewhere around 2018 or 2019. Christopher came out with the first version of the Star Trek character creator, and I do think that Christopher is responsible for it being a first-class tool. Like, I think he really laid excellent bones down there. I think that, the majority of the features that are in the system, I've poked and prodded and touched, et cetera, but the basics of it, really go back to the work that he laid down. And then at some point in 2020, Christopher was posting on the Modiphius forums and said that, because life had changed, et cetera, he had to pass it off to somebody else. And there had been a handful of people who responded and said, I have the skills, I would be willing to help out, et cetera. And I think it was Mr. X, Modiphius forum user Mr. X, who was the first person on the forum to say, well, why don't you open source this? Like, put it into a public repository and then anyone can contribute to it. And surprisingly, very quickly, Christopher did do that. It became put into a code repository that we techies talk about, one called GitHub. And then it took a period of time before anybody really tried to touch it. So I went in and looked at it a couple of times, and the big problem for me was that he had developed it using some Windows specific tools, and I just don't have a Windows machine anymore. And so that became a thing that, prevented me from touching it. But a period of about 9 months happened between the time where he first put his code in an open place and I first, made a revision to the code that I could actually send to him. And so I think that if I look back in the history, there's something like late March of 2021 is the first time I sent him code, and I said, hey, here's a change I think would be interesting. But by that point, Christopher had really run out of time to contribute to it. And so I was making a bunch of changes relating to the Klingon book, which had come out quite a bit earlier than that, and which, people were really clamoring for support. But I kept contributing this stuff throughout March and June and July, and it wasn't really going anywhere because Christopher just didn't have the time to do anything with those changes that I was giving him. So finally, we got to about September of 2021. At that point, people had been clamoring for so long for the ability to create Klingon characters in the Klingon book. I just said, okay, let's create let's load up my own version of this at the sta.bchomes.org site. And so that's how that version of the code came into existence. And I don't ever want to try to usurp Christopher's contributions to that. So I'm always very careful to describe myself as the current maintainer. Christopher was the creator of it, and he did so many incredible things for it.
Well, it's a labor of love too. I'm going to echo that because many people don't know, but Continuing Mission started with Colin Wilson, who actually did Marvel Plot Points. Actually, Mark Meredith, who did Marvel Plot Points, who I worked with him on his site, Labor of Love. And then when Star Trek Adventures started, a few of us like Colin Wilson and Tony Pye took it in. And then now people will always say, oh, Michael's Continuing Mission. It's like, no, I'm one of the collaborators. I may be a little bit more prolific, but I definitely didn't have the tech know-how to ever set up anything like this. I just know how to post a blog. I feel you, BC.
That's all you really need.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about you, though. I want to get to know you and your Star Trek history. Tell us when you first fell in love with Star Trek.
Sure. So I'm really old, and I was born when the first season of Star Trek, the original series, started to air. So when I was a kid, like it was constantly on reruns. It was either that or Lost in Space. And, I have my preferences about which of those two I like the most. And we were talking before the show began about how I grew up in a small city and on the border between Canada and the US. And one of the few TV stations that we got there was TV 50 from Detroit, and they regularly had Star Trek as in their rerun cycle. And so I would constantly come home from school and I'd watch Star Trek and I'd love it, etc. Although I always resented the fact that there were certain episodes that they were very uncomfortable airing on a regular basis, like the Mark of Gideon that talks about birth control and things like that.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was a very weird time. So I was a hardcore Trekkie growing up, and by the time I was in high school, the movies were coming out, and The Wrath of Khan, etc. And I guess I was in university when the Star Trek Next Generation started. So I got into that as well.
Fantastic. So now we get to ask you the question we ask everyone: what's your favorite show?
Yeah, so that's a hard question because I actually think I like different versions of Star Trek for different reasons. I kind of feel like TNG is sort of my model of what Star Trek is now. Like I feel like I've had enough time with that the Next Generation just kind of feels like the archetypal Star Trek to me, even though I've seen the original series longer. But there's incredible storytelling in Deep Space Nine, and there's elements of Voyager that I'm really quite fond of as well. So it's hard to say which one is my favorite. I guess that's an okay answer. My archetypal.
Okay, that's an okay answer. Like we vacillate, and honestly, anybody who's been around watching Star Trek long enough, you never know when a new series will take over. I'm worried that Strange New Worlds might usurp Voyager for me. I'm panicking.
But that's not a bad thing. I mean, it's a different series for different reasons and different times, and it may become your favorite, but it's still so early, right? It's only 10 episodes, and Voyager's been around for 179 episodes, something like that. Yeah. So I think you can love them all differently. It's okay.
Yeah, maybe, who knows? Maybe I'll love the comic book better for some reason. I've been having a thrill with IDW, what they're doing with the series. Okay, so your favorite character then? Can you give us a preferred character?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this recently. I am really starting to fall in love with Rock Talk. Like, I just love her. I think that she's really cool. It's just she's very clear what she wants. I think that she's an interesting conception of a character. I think that in the first episode of Prodigy, where it's revealed that you think she's the big scary rock monster, and you discover she's a little girl, and it's kind of like I just think as a concept that's a great character. So I really quite love her.
I agree. I think you get the first the second continuing conversations no prize because you picked a animated character as your favorite character. I don't think we had that before, Jim, have we?
No, I don't think so. I think I was trying to think if anybody had picked the character on Lower Decks, and I don't think anyone has. And then, so no, I think this is the first time for Prodigy. I do like Rock Talk too. In fact, I've just been watching some of the recent episodes and rewatching them, and I just like the empathy I have for her, because like she had that whole episode where she was completely by herself for like who knows how long of a time, to where she taught herself all this science stuff. Right? It's like, oh my gosh, like I try to imagine my 7-year-old doing that all by himself for, decades or whatever. It's like, God, that's so lonely. It's so sad. I mean, it's great that, she learned things and moved on, but it's like, oh man, just that. And of course, the format of the show won't really allow us to go back and really examine that. Like, I know if Rock Talk was a character on like Discovery, we'd have several episodes where they would dive deep into that with the counselor and all that stuff. And we're just not getting the opportunity, but what a great opportunity to get into child psychology and like, okay, how did that impact her? Like, because they kind of, admittedly, as much as I love the show, they kind of gloss over it to some extent. It's like, okay, here's where she was, here's where she is. She had that traumatic moment, and we're moving on. And it's like, oh, come on, let's get into that stuff, But that's what we would do in an RPG, right? If Rock Talk was a player character, we would spend session after session after session on that. No dice rolling, just getting into the character, RPG elements of it. But no, that's awesome that Rock Talk is the first Prodigy, as far as I know, on the show. So check that box.
You make me want a Rock Talk plush doll to hug. And it has to be half my body size just to hold. That would be great. Someone better be making one of those.
No doubt. Cool.
Very good. It's so nice to hear that, BC, get your background. Whenever anybody talks about their favorite show or shows or favorite character, you learn a little bit about them, which is why we ask that to everybody. Now getting into the thick of it, today, I think this is a comparison. Today, just so you all know, I got in the mail this. I had ordered this. It's in practically primo condition. It was made the same year I was born, 1975, which has made me feel really interesting. I don't know. It didn't make me feel bad or good, just interesting. And the reason why I think this is a great day that this arrived is because everyone I talked to about this book, it changed. Those who read it, Aaron Paulier is one of our science experts on the show, or whether it's Dayton Ward, who actually referred to it the other day when we did our last interview with them. Technology and these kind of things make role playing so much fun. Those little details, whether it's a graph that has some sort of techno babble, or which I was amazed, and I've never read this book before, and I started today, command structure, where it details out command structure, which is very important, especially if you want to play like an admiral level campaign, which we're strongly encouraging people to do. So then BC, who now has taken up the Star Trek Adventures character creator, is adding an entirely new depth to people's abilities to get into this game. I'm going to actually give it to Jim first. And the reason why is because were you expecting this to ever come to be? How do you feel about it? And let's frame it from that conversation there, this tool, and then we're going to head it over to BC and see if she can give us some cool, maybe tips, tricks, Easter eggs about using the site.
Okay, boy, that's a lot. I want to say I can't remember when Christopher started putting that app together, because I mean it's been so long now. Right? The game's been out for 6.5, 7 years. I feel like the character app has always been there in some format. It's hard for me to remember the way back to 2017 when we launched the game. I swear I thought for sure we had the builder already in some format, like whether it was in a basic format or a beta format or something like that. I honestly don't remember at this point. I'd have to find like the Google Wayback Machine or something just to see if I can find an early version of it, or dig through my Modifius emails. Cause like, of course I started on the line as just a writer, and I wasn't as focused on the the social media swirl around the game. Although I was certainly starting to get plugged in, because like, continuing mission was already there, and there was a subreddit, and there was some conversation happening online already, and plus we had Shielded It Tomorrow doing the buzz. But I want to say, Michael, I thought Eric mentioned that they used the character builder to build their characters, but maybe not. Maybe I don't think it could have possibly been in format during the playtest. It had to have come after the playtest, I think.
We didn't.
I honestly don't remember.
Yeah, we didn't add it in continuing missions until I'm thinking a couple of years after we asked permission to add it to the site. Right, BC? Do you recall any of that?
I don't remember when it was added, but one detail that stands out in my mind is I happen to know that 2 nights ago, I was playing in one of my regular Star Trek games, and the GM mentioned to us afterwards that was actually the 4th anniversary of our campaign. So the 4th anniversary of our Session 0. And I remember in our Session 0, we actually created the characters using the original version of the character creator. Wow. So it has been there for at least 4 years.
2018. That sounds about right, and that's probably when we would have got it up on the site.
Well, I mean, 2018. That would have been shortly after the game launched, right? We came out in September 17, and then that hit in 18. That makes sense. But then to the other part of your question, Michael, like what do I think about it? I can't think highly enough of it. The fact that Christopher made this incredible thing just out of the love of the game and out of the love of Star Trek, and was able to make it so robust, right? Even as we had only a handful of supplements out, and then he dutifully updated it every time a new supplement came out with all the new species and whatnot that we brought into it. And then of course BC took it to the next level and added so much more stuff, like the Klingons and the ships and just everything else, that all the enhancements that you made, especially the little stuff that we probably don't even notice. Because like I know how programmers work, and like you're always tinkering with it, and you're always refining that code on the back end, and like you're making a lot of adjustments and modifications to it that completely goes over everybody's head. But you're doing it because you love it, and I don't think there are enough thank yous out there. I mean, speaking as a project manager, first of all, like that tool is next to continuing mission. That tool is so essential. Because I think back to D&D when 3.0 or 3.5, it came with that CD in the book, the character builder. Like that was such an important application for that game. Like to the point where like I don't think my group could have played that game if we didn't have some sort of digital tool helping us figure out all the feats and all the math and just all the stuff that was involved. And then 4th edition had another character builder, and then of course now we've got D&D. I don't know what it's called, Beyond or something. That whole online thing. Like I mean, I think in this day and age, especially because the younger generations of gamers are so technology focused, if you don't have an app or character builder or a dice roller or something that can supplement the game, you're already behind the curve. And I'm very aware that a huge number of Star Trek Adventures gamers reference that builder all the time. And like I know I've got it on a bookmark. I'm there all the time. And like literally every single conversation I see, whether it's the Facebook group or the subreddit or Discord, or all of them, right? Just all of the forums, everything else. Everybody's talking about it. And there's always a constant reference to it because so many new fans come into the game and say, okay, how do I get started in this game? What do I buy? Like, how do I even start? And, I'm not shy about it. I'll say, look, you can buy, the starter set, or you can buy the core book or whatever. But if you want to get into the game, get the quick start and then log into the character app because it's free. All the character stuff is there. Get your feet wet, get into it. I'm the worst project manager because I don't push people to buy the books, right? It's like, you know what? Get the quick start, get the character builder, you're off and running. if you're a player, Game Master, maybe you should buy the core book or the Rules Digest or something. But really, at this point, 6.5 years into it, like if you've got that character builder, that's all you need.
I think they end up buying the books anyways, just because of the quality. People want to touch the quality.
Yeah, there's so much great content in the books, but like because this game is so theater of the mind, or can be so theater of the mind, all the essential bits are in that builder. And Medicius is gonna be mad at me for saying this, but honestly,
no. Well, but the fact of the matter is, the easier you make it for people to get through their session 0 and character creation, the sooner they can get to playing the game. Which is why I find this tool. I mean, if I was to ask BC, how many characters or starships have you generated just tinkering around? Could you even count?
Yeah, there's been a lot. I guess I do have one counter argument, which is that I think the books, the Modiphius books are beautiful. Like, I just think the artwork in there is so evocative that it really transports me into the setting and makes me want to live in that setting and tell stories in that setting. And I think that, that's something that, previous versions of Star Trek games just didn't quite give me. And I think that, that's something that is wonderful about the Modiphius books. And I cannot claim to provide that in the character creator.
Yeah. And I think it's the mirroring of the different items that make the whole world. We always say we have the best fans, ever, the most friendly, cooperative, collaborative, supportive fans for it. So for UBC, if I was new to the Star Trek Adventures character creator, what would be kind of your elevator pitch for it, and what are some things I should know to really get me into it and excited about using it and generating characters?
Yeah, so I mean, if you start off with a premise that you love Star Trek and you want to play in that world, then one of the fastest ways to get kickstarted into the world is to create yourself a basic Starfleet character. The creator will help you establish the background elements following, the life path rules options that will give you the skeletal framework of your character that tells you things like, where did you start from? What did you specialize in? What are some of the career events that, demarcated important elements or important background of your character? And then you have something that you can keep. You get a PDF out of the end of it. And there you are. Like, you've got a character that, has already given you the start of imagining what this whole character can be like. And I just think that's really cool.
Yeah. I don't know if you had a chance to watch our session 0 with the Pearsons. My wife even was on it. And Jim, and Al Spader too. He had joined that session 0. And that whole experience we had just walking through the character creator, by the end of it, we were just riffing off. We basically had our story and our plot, right, Jim? If you remember that session.
Yeah, we went through that night, and everybody built their characters, and we were like, "All right, let's go. Let's run this game. Let's do it." Yeah, we had spent the whole night just riffing off each other, and we had all these great character concepts together. And we had even gone into building the ship in a future episode, but we still use the builder. And we were like, "Okay, all the pieces are here." And like, me and Al and Michael, we're all longtime GMs. Like, we saw it, right? We saw all the energy and the potential there. And we're like, yeah, we could start running this game next week. Let's do it. And of course, life and schedules got in the way, and that's just where we are. But I mean, that's the power of a good tool, right? I mean, obviously we have to thank Nathan Dowdell for creating that life path in the first place. I love life path systems. I think that's one of the things I love the most about the Last Unicorn Games version of Star Trek. I know other games and other properties and other IPs use life paths too, but there's just something about Star Trek that I love. And I remember, like, with my group back in the day, we would spend, like, if we weren't actively playing a campaign, we would just pull out the Last Unicorn Games books, set up that life path, and we would just create characters. We would create crews of ships that we would never run, just because we loved that life path and we loved creating stories. I mean, we even got it down to I hate to say we got it down to a formula, but like we would, because we knew math, right? We could say, okay, we're going to set this game in 2365. And if all of our characters are a certain age, then we know they went to the academy at such and such a year, and they had these events in such and such a time. And using the life path, right, especially in the Last Unicorns version, you could just add more career events based on how many years you were in the service, right? Or in Starfleet. So it was like, oh, I need to roll another random event. Okay. Oh, I did this thing. And it's like, you just add it on and get a couple extra points or whatever for your character. And it was just fun, right? It was like a mini game within the game. Even if we weren't going to actually run the show or run an episode or the game or something, we still got to play characters and like have that little moment of creative Star Trekness that we were doing. And that's translated directly into this app. Because I know I've had a couple groups. We were like, oh, what kind of game should we run? Oh, let's run an original series game. Okay, let's make characters. Okay, so we made this whole crew of characters, and we didn't end up running the game, but we still got to do that creative experience. So I know a lot of folks complain about not being able to find players or not being able to find game masters, but they get some joy out of just using the builder to create characters and then just imagining what they could do with it. So it's really interesting.
And something as you just spoke, I just completely forgot to ask BC this question before we get into some of your favorite things on Star Trek Adventures character creator, your history with RPG. I didn't even ask you that.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So I think that I first started playing Dungeons and Dragons in the early 80s. That was in the, Satanic Panic days, the years of the Satanic Panic. And then got into Traveler and Villains and Vigilantes. But I started playing FASA Star Trek very early on and played that a lot. And really, that's the version of a Star Trek game that I played prior to Star Trek Adventures the most. I did not get as much into the Decipher of the Last Unicorn Games versions of them. I was a FASA player for a good long time, but now I'm firmly in the STA camp.
Oh, I got to ask why. Like FASA STA. Now we got to ask that question. You just opened up Pandora's box.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that I think the first few times I played it, I realized very quickly that it felt like I was in a Star Trek episode. And I think, for example, the mechanic of the game that has characters helping each other out when they're trying to do things like that feels very much like what we see on the episodes. And like the episodes are structured that way because it's narratively useful to have more than one character talk to each other. But once you get, the players are sitting there saying, okay, we got to solve what the alien gizmo is doing. And, I'll get in there and I'll try to use my ancient technologies focus. And maybe the engineer can help me and we can figure out what's going on with this over here. And that just felt like true to the environment, et cetera. It was great.
That's nice. How many games do you play in? How many different Star Trek Adventures games?
Yeah, so I'm currently in 2 regular games. Okay. I had been in a very short-lived third game quite some time earlier, but that petered out relatively quickly. But one of them is 4 years old at this point, and the other is probably approaching 2 years at the moment.
Okay, so the 4-year-old one, what's the name of the ship and who's your character?
Yeah, so I play the captain. The ship is the USS Alan Turing. My captain is Delton, and is one of these. And we're in the sort of just immediately post Dominion War, Shackleton Expanse exploration phase. And my captain is one of those captains that rarely leaves the ship. So I end up playing a lot of supporting characters when we go away off on away missions. So that's always great fun too.
I'm with you. It's funny. I play in another one where I play the captain and she doesn't want to leave the ship ever. I'm like, it's so comfortable up here. Why should I leave? It's not my job anyway. So I say that's funny.
And it's interesting because my co-players are like, we're okay if the captain comes on the away mission, but the enemy ship could rematerialize in orbit anytime. I need to be here in case there's an emergency.
That's funny. And the second game, what about that one?
Yeah, so my second game is the one I'm a GM for, and it's a much more Deep Space Nine-like game. My players are on a space station. It is, farther out in the Alpha Quadrant than Deep Space Nine is, but otherwise it has a very similar setup of Deep Space Nine. They're there as a Federation presence, invited by a non-Federation world to help them, help guide them through a process that hopefully will lead to that world joining the Federation.
Yeah, I never get tired of hearing all the universe of stories out there. It's like people think it could be boring. It's like, no, if you really lived in the Federation, you would want to be knowing everything that's going on. And I just feel like we have this active universe of players. It's so beautiful. I love that. Cool. All right, Jim, any questions before I start asking about the ins and outs of the character creator?
I have questions, but I'm happy to wait. So go ahead, jump into the nitty gritty.
Okay, now I'm in suspense. All right, so BC, I just want to know. Okay, again, I'm new. You talked about the overview elevator pitch, for the Star Trek Adventures character creator. What are some things I should know that are in there, maybe that I didn't pick up the first time?
Good question. So, I mean, I think a lot of the items are discoverable, relatively easily discoverable, but there are some features in there that I'm particularly chuffed about having created or having put in there. I'm sure most people have spotted it by now, but I remember like the day I pushed the code, I was kind of like, I'm waiting for somebody to mention this. And that was adding the little ship outlines to the individual starships. When I started doing that, I was kind of like, this is something I want. When you had John Nguyen here a while ago, I think Jim, you had said there's something about fans who always just want to put their own little spin on things and create and stuff in their own way and create their own sheets and what have you. And like I related to that because like that's totally how I approach building stuff on the character creator. I'm kind of like, this is what I wanted. I'm at the point now where people know how to send me requests for things, but a lot of what I put in for the longest time is just sort of like, this is what I want to see in it, and one of the early things I really wanted to throw in there was like changing the outline of the ship that appears on the PDF forms that get outputted.
Definitely cool. Of course, I'm going to be like, add a Kittimer class. We'll give a chance.
Yeah, so I mean, part of the limitation there for me is like I don't 3D model all of these things. So I usually start off with a 3D model of a ship that I acquire somewhere. And then I I set it up so it's in the various angles that you see on the sheets that come out, and I trace them and outline them, etc. So some of the ships that don't have an outline are just because I haven't been able to find a 3D model of them to date.
We may need to make a. Jim's thinking what I'm thinking. We may need to.
I was going to say I know a guy. So if you wouldn't mind terribly, BC, sending me a list of the ones that you're missing, I think I might be able to help you.
I suspect I know who you're thinking about at the moment.
What's funny though, what we're discovering, BC, and especially in the last 6 months that we've been interviewing people, I don't care who it is or what they're doing in the Star Trek universe. If they're into Star Trek Adventures, they're just so collaborative. It blows my mind. Even Dayton Ward, I'm going to tell a quick Dayton Ward story real quick. When we interviewed him, I think that was it'll be a couple of weeks by the time this airs show. He had found out that someone had taken his novel, Agents of Influence, and reverse engineered it into a STA module. And I just put it out there, in fact, today, looking for the person because Dayton wanted to connect with them and just talk with them. So you have this New York Times bestselling author for 20 years who, because of Star Trek Adventures, is more than happy to celebrate our fans that just blows my mind. So BC, when you say you need 3D models, I'm not going to make any promises, but Jim knows people.
That, Michael, you touched on that. It just blows my mind. I mean, I've been involved in the Star Trek-y stuff for a while now, just thanks to those short stories I got published. But like, it astounds me in a good way. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised because it's Star Trek and Star Trek is family and it's all about collaborative and diversity and equity and all that stuff. But like consistently, when I'm on social media, like from all the production people, all the designers, all the ship people, there's just so many people that are willing to help you out if you ask questions, and you show your love for the franchise and you show your respect for the franchise, especially the respect. And you're like trying to do good by it and try to do good by the fans. It's amazing how many people will just bend over backwards to help you. And I think Star Trek Adventures is where it is now, partly because I've been able to find those people, right, and foster great relationships. And collectively, we're all doing it, right. But it's just so cool to see everybody pull together. And I know, Michael, you talk about this all the time. We see the fans supporting each other on all the different social medias and continuing mission and all that stuff. So I just love the fact that we have such a vibrant, supportive community for this game. It's really cool.
Yeah, for sure. All right, BC. So sorry I digressed, but a couple other things. I know there's some favorite things I have on the site that I discovered lately, but what else do you have for us? What else?
Yeah. So it's taken me a while to completely make this available, but I'm now in a place where like you can create main characters and supporting characters and starships, and create a view version of them that has a permanent URL that's associated with it. So if I create a character, there's like a little view button that appears at the very end of it. And if I click that button, it opens up in like a new tab, and there's a URL that's associated with that tab that's permanent. Basically, it allows you to return to that character anytime that you want in the future. So like you can take that URL and you can mail that to your GM, or you can't tweet them because they're very long or something like that. But
I did not know that.
But now that you have that, like one of the next steps to this is to be able to say, okay, now I've got a permanent way of bookmarking my character. I can change my character now. I can apply milestones. I can, make revisions. I can give my character a promotion, etc. And that part doesn't exist yet, but like that's the obvious next step.
I have a question. Oh
yeah, sure.
Hold on. I think very linearly. I'm sorry if you go too far. So if I use that URL and I bookmark it, say for instance, if I have a crew manifest, and I've decided to hyperlink to that.
Yeah.
If in the future I want to change that character sheet, am I able to?
At this exact moment in time, you cannot. But that is the next set of changes to do there. So we can say, okay, now that I can go back to that character, it should be a simple exercise to say, now I want to start applying milestones. Now I want to start, allowing me to change. I've had promotions happen with some of my players,
I'm adding one more wish list in there that I could drop one of my STO picks into the little square.
So that's another feature I just would love to add. It's just, I don't want to take away from cool sites like
ST avatars.
Yeah, that there's that wonderful character art creator, but it never loads for me anymore, sadly. But I've always wanted to have something like that, maybe just with their heads or something like that, because I come from the generation of RPGers that, the character sheet always had the little box where you could draw your character. And for me, like that's always something that should be on a character, is the ability to say, okay, I need, the Andorian, I need to see the antenna.
Well, someone's listening to this, and I have said that I'm gonna go wish list, because a lot of our wishes come true, which is really weird. But STO has that character creator at the beginning, Star Trek Online, and if there was a marrying of this with that, there'd be cross-pollination of people playing both games. I truly believe that. So Thomas.
Yeah, although the only downside I would say to that is like STO is wonderful, but doesn't always let you create all of the types of races that people might want to have, so I can easily see people wanting, I want to be this obscure race from this one episode, etc.
The species, yeah. I think I've seen some people do some interesting modifications for the species to get them tweaked.
Yeah.
But you never know. It'll go. It's something that, we're all used to something better than nothing if we've been playing RPG before there were even computers involved. So that's true. Okay, cool. That's good. Anything else? That's cool. I'm going to remember that one because I'll be playing with that tonight.
Yeah. So again, this is starting to talk about like what the futures are. And so now that we have this idea of the characters that can be remembered and bookmarked, I can imagine a few things that you may want to do with that. So one of those is like, now I could use like that bookmark version of the character as my tracking thing. So I can say, hey, maybe I can just click it. Okay, I've lost this much stress, and I've used my point of determination, and I've got these injuries, etc. And I can have that as a persistent thing, that I can come back to. For if I'm playing one night and then we have to stop and we have to pick it up the next night, I can remember this is what state my character was in, etc. And I've also wanted to be able to do supplementary types of tools. So I have a GM, for example, who's still a very paper oriented guy, and like so he prints out all of the character things, all the character sheets, etc. But like he's constantly flipping around to things. So I've always wanted to have like summary sheets. So if I could be able to say, hey, I want to create a summary of all of the NPCs in this particular scene, I can just start pasting all of the URLs together and say, okay, now let's create one sheet that has the high level summary of all of those 6 characters or 12 characters, or however many there are. And, just be able to look down the list and see, this is the order they're probably fighting in and what have you, stuff like that.
Got it. Find applicable focuses, traits.
Exactly.
or away team formation.
Exactly.
You'll have to call that first officer duty roster or something.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like. Very cool. Very cool. I'll mention one of the things that blew my mind that I noticed the other day when I was doing some character creation. And recently the PDFs have been adapted so that there's an option for 2-page PDF, which now will articulate the talents in detail. So that did before it was like, oh, I had to remember the talents, or I went back and wrote them in myself. And that I can't tell you how much of a time saver that is, that now the option, even the 1-page vertical not landscape.
Yeah, it's landscape.
Oh, it's landscape. Now you have the 1-page landscape option with the talents listed. That is mind-blowing. That must have happened just over the last couple of months, right? I'm figuring.
Yeah, I can't quite remember when it first happened, but yeah, it was definitely something. Again, a lot of the things that go into the app are things that, I personally find useful, and I have players in my own campaign who like don't have a copy of the rule book and will forget what their talents actually do and not necessarily remember to bring those talents up. So having a version of the character sheet that has the talent description on it just helps them out so much, and I really like that.
It's beautiful. You're improving it because you're playing it. That's awesome.
Exactly.
That's the key, right? I mean, it's one thing to build an app, but the fact that you're actively playing the game just makes it so much better, because you're in it. You know exactly what changes need to be made or that you want to make to make it a better gaming experience, not just for yourself but for your fellow players and your game master. And I mean, that's win-win right there, right? So I'll just add that I've been spending, admittedly, a lot of time using the system generator in the tool. And I only just recently discovered that if you roll your cursor over the system name, a little pencil pops up so you can actually change the registration or the registry. But what I can't find, and this is not a tech call or anything, but I wish there was a way that I could export that system generator as a PDF. I don't see a way to do that. So I guess that's a request. If it's not, unless I'm missing it, I may just be missing it.
It's on the backlog.
Okay.
Utopia Planitia required a lot of effort, and I diverted.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry about that.
You just blew my mind. I did not know you could change the sector names. That's
isn't that awesome?
changer.
It's so sweet.
And systems. So if you go to an individual system, you decide you want to rename that system. Now, I also feel like there should be a pencil beside like an individual world. So rather than just be, Delta 4, you can actually have one world that's called whatever.
Can I ask, when you copy to clipboard, does that just copy like a PNG file, or what does that do?
No, it actually copies it creates a text version of all of the data for the system, the sector, and all of the systems in the sector.
Okay.
So it ends up creating a large amount of data. And that was basically a stopgap until I could get like the full PDF availability out there. So there is a little export to PDF, but at the moment it will only give you the sector and not the individual systems. And systems are usually much more interesting than the sector is.
But still, honestly, let me tell you what we hear a lot from people on continuing missions. On continuing mission, they're constantly asking for battle grids. And I could totally see, because since you have this grid formation, how you could generate this into battle grids, especially for Roll20 Play or Discord, where I play on Discord. This is a really good feature. I'm drooling. Okay.
I do like it. Again, that was another thing that this goes back to my Traveler days. Like I used to love the Traveler supplements that would often have like the little 1-page summary of the system, and there's usually a diagram of like the individual orbits and what the individual worlds were, etc.
Yeah.
And like that's just something. The number of times I've needed to give that to a player is small, but like the joy I get out of having that is high. So
yeah, we talk about graphics all the time. We in fact talk in the Game Master's Guide about how you could just find random graphics or something like that, but it just changes everyone's perspective in a game when they see something. Those visual learners and kinesthetic learners just bounce off of that, which is really cool. Jim, you're smiling, you're grinning. Did you discover something new?
I discovered that just because we're talking, and trust me, I am paying attention. But I went into the sector builder, and I don't know how I did this. I must have. Let me try it again here. Next gen. I went to create a space sector, and what I must have done is I went straight to the notable systems. I didn't think to go push the back to sector button and go back to the actual sector list that had, I know what I was doing. I saw the map on the top, and I clicked on a planet in the map, and it didn't even occur to me to scroll down to look at the list of planets underneath it. So I was clicking on the planet. I was like, oh, this planet's really cool. I want to print off this sheet of information, but I can't. But now I see it that I can go back to the sector and see the list of all the systems in the sector and print at least that view off, which is really cool, because I see that it comes up in the LCARS format. And you talk about player aids. Like if I was at a game table, or if I was in a virtual tabletop, I could like share that PDF or share the printout with somebody, and it looks like it's on a pad, it's all that stuff. And it's like, that's the stuff that I really wanted back in the 80s when we were doing homebrew Star Trek, and we just didn't have the technology, right? We still had dot matrix printers, and it just didn't look right. We could hand draw the LCARS, but it just didn't have the same look and feel. But now with the technology that we've got now, I mean, this is mind-blowingly awesome. And if I can find a way to help you get to the point where we can print out those individual systems, all that great detail that you got in here for these systems, with the luminosity and the spectral classes and the companion stars and the worlds and blah 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 blah. I mean, there's just so much here, right? And it's just super exciting that's where we are now with technology and role playing games, and not just Star Trek. I mean, it seems like every RPG now has a huge fan base that's super devoted to the game, that creates tools like this and resources and apps and art and so much stuff. So the new generation of Star Trek RPGers, like, enjoy the wealth of material that you have at your disposal now, because we didn't have this back in the 80s. And I wish we did, but here we are, and we're taking advantage of it now. So this is cool.
Can I ask you a question too, BC? When we're looking at the spectral classes or the designations for the worlds, does that correspond with what's in the science division book?
Yeah. So I think a lot of the basic rules in there start with the Shackleton Expanse. So I think the sector generator button doesn't appear unless you've selected the Shackleton Expanse book as one of your sources. So a lot of the high level details are just based on tables that exist at the back of the Shackleton Expanse book. And I've elaborated to say, you don't have to be in the Shackleton Expanse to generate a sector. Like, I think that makes sense. And then I've also found math for the other things that I'm able to do. So the Shackleton Expanse never really talked about things like hydrographic percentage or mass of a planet, etc. But RPGs exist in abundance, and finding math for that is a thing that can actually happen. And actually, there was lots of conversations on the Modiphius forums. There's a whole thread about how do you do this and who has great rules for that, and what's the cream of the crop. I think user Mr. X again, was one of the people who talked a lot about hex mapping the Shackleton Expanse, etc.
So now you have me intrigued once more. Your educational background. Are you a scientist of some sort?
I'm not. I'm a mathematician as my background. I have a degree in pure math and theater arts, oddly.
Actually, combination. That's called a Star Trek writer. That's perfect. That's exactly what you're lining up to be. Sorry, my table just literally for some reason just started raising up. I think it got as excited as I escape. Let me get it back in a position. That's really too funny. Weird. Okay, I'll go there.
Nice. If I had given him free reign to do so, Aaron Pollier would have gone into so much more detail on the planets and everything else. And I was like, well, we got to keep this down to 5-6 pages at best, because the Shackleton book, it blew up over the course of its development to where it's 320 pages now. And I was like, Aaron, I really want to get like a 5 or 6 page high level kind of build your own sector kind of thing. And BC, you mentioned it, that I really my initial concept was a group could actually literally pull out hex paper and start building their own sectors one hex at a time as you're exploring, kind of like a Forbidden Lands, or there's plenty of other RPGs where you just kind of discover as you go, and as that fog of war lifts, you continue to build out the map. And that's kind of like the initial concept I had. And then of course it changed and morphed into what it is now, which is super cool. But Aaron being the the scientist that he is. He could have gone so far. He could have written a 300-page book just on the science of building planets and moons and all that stuff. And I was like, we got to stop at a certain point because I know there'd be fans who would eat it up, but like, even with those 6 pages that are in Shackleton, there was a couple places where when I was editing it, my eyes were starting to glaze over a little bit because I just don't have the science background to really understand all of it. So I was like, Aaron, and I went back and forth with Aaron multiple times. I said, is this draft? Is this right? Is this where it needs to be? And he'd make a little tweak to it here and there, and he'd make a little tweak here and there and be like, but we could go into so much more detail. I was like, Aaron, we can't do any more. So I hear you. I feel the need to go even further, but I'm gratified to hear that you were able to find additional resources to add that extra level of detail. Super cool.
Yeah. And I totally get there's a part of me, I think I actively campaigned a couple of times on the forums to say, I wish the science book would have like a whole section on planet generation. And I've talked about that a few times. Just because for whatever reason, like I just really get immersed into that part of the game. But I understand the tension. Like the number of people who really care about that at the same level as I do is probably vanishingly small, and it's not going to sell books, like at the end of the day, you want to produce the stuff that's going to sell the books, which is, I guess, why I think that, the character creator can be such a wonderful complement to what's available in the books. It's like, hey, I can put in the stuff that I really care about and add this, and hopefully it, can be consumed in a way that other people other than me find useful. And it doesn't, contradict anything that's available in the books. It's just, adds a little bit more.
Okay, I'm understanding better why you like Star Trek Adventures, because you can go there, but then you also have your theater arts background and you get to storytell and narrate, which is totally interesting. That's so cool.
Like, to go back to that conversation we were having earlier about playing the supporting characters, like that's a thing I hadn't seen in any other game until I started playing Star Trek Adventures. But like, it is something that, my one game does in abundance, because we're constantly like starting to look at, well, is it really a good idea to send this character into this situation? Like, shouldn't we have an astrophysicist, or shouldn't we have, a whatever? And like, when we do that, like, we're able to like immediately come up with a new character and infuse that character with some interesting, personality quirks and what have you. I'm like, I love it. My theater background just adores that.
That's so cool. I'm going to we could go on all night about details. I got to talk about the talent section before, you'd have to create a character to look at the talents. Now you created a talents overview menu, which even blows my mind because it's searchable by keyword, which really makes life easy because there's so many talents now. I want to ask you, do you have a favorite talent?
Do I have a favorite talent? Wow. Well, I mean, there are talents that are the most versatile. The cautious X are really versatile talents. But is there one that I really like? Some of the new ones that came out in the player's guide were really quite interesting. Like there's the one about there's that one talent, I can't remember the name of it, but it's like, if you and other members of your team all have this one talent, then you can like generate additional momentum, etc.
It's not collaboration. I just was looking at it the other day. I know what you're talking about. Was it advisor? Was it the advisor one?
I don't think so. Okay. I'm pretty sure advisor is something else, but I'd have to go back and look it up.
Okay, I figured if you looked at all these talents, you probably were like, "Wow!" You read through all of them. Yeah.
Well, when I create characters, like I create a lot of characters when I build, when I develop the tool, and for whatever reasons, I've always loved the Andorians as a species, and so like almost all of them have the Yushan Tor, like, so that's probably the talent I have selected the most often.
Good. I never even asked you, Jim, if you had a favorite talent.
I don't. Probably because there are just so many, and I just love building characters with interesting quirks and personalities, and I think the talents just tie right into that. Where you can, like, I know we've talked about this at length, Michael, where you can, like, if you've got really cool values and really cool selection of talents and focuses too, like, that's a whole character, like, that's your character right there. You don't even have to, it doesn't even matter what the attributes and disciplines are. If you got cool focuses and cool values and you pick some cool talents, you got an awesome character right there. That being said, though, and I don't remember all the titles because there's so many talents, and I have such a short memory. And the worst horrible thing is that I'm not actively in a game right now, so I'm a little bit, that tiny bit distance removed, which I know is kind of hard to believe because I'm steeped in Star Trek adventures every day. But there was a talent in the science book. It was like what is it, like bewildering conversation or something like that. Baffling brief. Yeah. I just love the concept of that, where you get into a conversation with somebody and then you just start spouting technobabble and they're like, what? And they just get confused and they just kind of walk away. And I was like, oh, what a great character idea, to be so steeped in it and just to use that to your advantage.
Yeah. And
honestly, there's so many great talents that as a gamer, I could see creative, interesting ways to use them in ways that the book doesn't really write or dictate. And I just love taking that little spin on things like, here's what it says, but here's what it could do, because it doesn't say you can't do this, and just like play at the edges of it and stuff. So
for those of you,
I'll punt on this, Michael.
I was going to say, for those of you who are just getting the Utopia Planitia in the mail, all those talents are in here too, the ship talents too. So it's not just characters, but ships. So blowing our mind, BC, every time I open this up. I don't know how you keep up with everything.
And again, in the interest of full disclosure, like Christopher created the first version of that talents overview. The things like the keyword search are things that I added to it because I really wanted. Again, a lot of things happen because I have a particular vested interest in something working a certain way.
Ease of use, right?
Exactly.
Ease of use. Yes.
No,
absolutely. So, Michael, I can't let you get away. I got to know, what's your favorite talent?
It's totally self-serving because I wrote them. And I haven't. Okay. Well, it's only because the reason I'm only saying it is because when I figured out how powerful talents were, one of my goals was to create talents that were singular to the person, with the goal of encouraging players to understand you don't have to pick a talent from the book. You could use it as a framework, but you could even more distinct. So I'm going to pick two of them. The one that we discussed for 7 of 9, collective memory. I originally had called it assimilated species, and Erin said, nope, change it to collective memory, which we did in the update, which really she needed that as a character. It wasn't a focus. It wasn't a trait, but that talent really was necessary. And all I did was borrow from the other trait that says when you travel, you're so well traveled that you can pick any focus. That's all I did was adapt for 7 of 9. And then the other one was for Lorca, menagerie. That was totally pulled out of my butt. And that was just like, for what we saw in the show, that lab was so scary. I didn't know where to put it. And I said, okay, it's going to be a talent. And so I specialized. And the point was to teach players, get crazy. If you don't know where something fits, create a talent that's singular to your character, and then ask your game master to write a story where you get to show off a little bit.
Mm-hmm. That's a feature that should be in the character creator, the ability to create a custom talent.
Or even just to be able to rename the talents, like right there within the app, right? I think that's something, I know it's in the core book, and I think a lot of fans miss that Nathan specifically called out in the core book. Look, if this talent doesn't, like the flavor text, if the title of the talent and the flavor text don't quite fit your character concept, change it. Change it. Just whatever works, right? Like if Andorians have a different approach to things, and you would call this talent something a little different, then go ahead and do it. And I think I think a lot of gamers, by and large, they look at the rule books as kind of the not holy writ, but like they don't want to deviate from that. Partly because, like, I'm sure they want to have a common language at the table. And if I'm calling cautious, but Michael's calling it Z-bot, then we start talking in the games like, what the hell is Z-bot? Oh wait, that's cautious, but my character calls it Z-bot because of blah blah blah. And here's my whole world building element to it, which I think would be cool, but you need that common frame of language. And so I can see, I get that piece of it. But at the same time, like I really want to push gamers to be more creative. Like take what's in the book, but don't take what's in the book as gospel. Like take it as your stepping stone and your starting point, and make more cool stuff out with what we've given you. You know, take these tools and bend them and mold them and do more cool stuff with it, and then tell us about it so that we can be inspired and put that even more cool stuff in the next book, so that we can continue to build on what we've got. But we're only 6 years into it. We got time.
So BC, talk to us as we start getting toward. Again, I told you, it was funny before we started even filming this. I told BC, I said, we planned 30 minutes, but we can go on for hours.
Hours.
So BC, as we get close to the end, talk to us a little bit about your wishes and future for Star Trek Adventures. We'd like to really hear that from you.
Yeah. So, I mean, Star Trek Adventures has filled a lot of my wishes, and ways that I think are really surprising. Like, I think the mission briefs have been a fantastic addition to Star Trek Adventures. I think I might really love to see something else that has the same sort of vibe of the Shackleton Expanse. I think one of the things I didn't love as much about FASTA is that a lot of the supplements tended to be about, and then you do this with the Klingons, and then you have this adventure with the Klingons. And I think one of the things I really love about the Shackleton Expanse is that it felt like it captured that element of, here's my ship and I'm going out to this world and nobody's been to this world. Nobody knows what these people are like. And let's meet them and let's see what we're going to learn about that. So yeah, I guess that is probably the thing that I would love to see more of. But Star Trek Adventures has filled so many wonderful gaps for me. I had difficulty coming up with something, except for maybe more things about space stations.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, I know Jim has that infamous whiteboard, which one day I'll sneak in and take a picture of. He speaks about the whiteboard.
Yeah. Well, I have such limited space in my house. It's all virtual. It's all on my Scrivener. Like I got this. I love Scrivener as a writing aid, a writing tool, and it's got a great corkboard feature in it, and it's just got card after card after card in it. And I'm gratified to say that after 6 years, I've been able to check a lot of those bits off the list. But as they continue to come out with new series and new episodes, like I keep finding ways to put new cards on there, and it's like a never-ending stream of stuff. Like, that's the advantage with Star Trek, right? Is we've got a 56-year-old property, and there's so many comics and so many novels and so many video games. There's just so much Star Trek out there that even after 6 years and well over 100 products, we still have barely even scratched the surface of what's possible. And I think what I've really run into lately is the fact that there's so much stuff I would like to do, but financially it doesn't make sense to do a lot of this stuff. Like I would love to do little PDF supplements for all the novels, but so many of them would sell 10 copies. Right. So creatively, I would be super gratified to have that huge stack of PDFs available. But realistically, as the project manager, I have to look at that stupid profit and loss and spreadsheet and go, I can't make it happen. I can't do it. There's not enough money. there's just no way to make the money work. So we need to hurry up and get to that post-scarcity society where money doesn't matter. So we can just create this stuff just for the hell of it, just for the joy of it. Anyway, exactly. I'm rambling, so I'll stop.
Good. No, it's good. Good. We're called continuing conversations for a reason. Good. Okay, well, let's get to our gratitude. I think I'll go, and then BC, we're going to let you do your gratitude, and we'll have Jim close it out as we usually do. And even though I normally go brick and mortar, I'm going to have to say that this year so far, especially during the closing year, we've had some amazing guests who have done a lot. Without a paycheck from Modifius, just as super fans to further the game, which benefits us all. Thinking again about our conversation we had with Eric Campbell and Eliza Perlman. I say Perlman. It's Pearl. She's not Rita Perlman. I was watching Cheers. Sorry, that's my fault.
Yeah. Sorry, Eliza.
Eliza. Yeah. And the other contributors to Continuing Mission, and of course, BC, why we had you today, are John Wynn, who did the Discord bot. Big thank yous, because the game would not be where it's at right now. I know it makes my job so much easier as a GM, as a forever GM. These tools are bookmarked on my desktop or on my URL bar, and it's just such a big thank you. So I appreciate the effort you put in. We want to appreciate where it started. Also, you said Chris, right? Hughes?
Christopher Lundenberg, I think is it.
Christopher Lundenberg. Yeah. So, thank you. But again, BC, for you picking up the torch and carrying on. You make life so much easier to get other people in the game. I constantly refer them to the website. So big thank you, BC, for that. Mm-hmm. All right. BC, what about you? What's your gratitude?
Yeah. Sure. So, I mean, in terms of people, obviously Christopher Lundberg is a huge target of my gratitude. I'd also point to a whole bunch of other people who have been contributing, bug reports and feature requests, etc. Felderberg. I have handle names for people, unfortunately, Takeshi, Mr. X, and anyone who's raised, a bug or a feature report about the app. I really appreciate them. And then in terms of brick and mortar stores, I confess I have not frequented them in a few years because I haven't really bought physical books in a few years. But here in Toronto for many years, there's a store called Harry Tarantula that I bought a large number of my RPG things from. So those would be my items.
Nice. I'm scared of spiders that have trouble going in there, but I'll go anyways. All right, Jim, take us out.
Well, I got to thank, like I said earlier in the show, Christopher for creating the initial build and maintaining it for at least 2-3 years, however long he was able to do that. And then endless gratitude to UBC for taking up the mantle and carrying it forward and bringing in the next evolution of it, because you've added so much to it. I wish I could find the old version and the new version and just put them next to each other and say, holy cow, look at the changes that have happened over just a couple of years now. In fact, because I think you said you picked it up in late 2021 or 2020, 2021. And it's only been a year and a half or something. And it's such a quantum leap forward, and that's certainly not taking anything away from what Christopher did, like we talked about earlier, but it's such an amazing tool, and it's such a great gateway to help people get into the game. And you can't put a value on that, right? There's just to give a community a tool to make it easier for them to play the game. I mean, that's gold. And the fact that you have such a robust network of people who are feeding you constant bug reports and enhancement requests and changes and feedback. I see it especially on the official forums. I think that's where it's most active. Weirdly, which is it's interesting how different social media formats orient toward different types of people, and the folks on the official forums really seem to be more technically inclined than some of the other social media, which is great. I just love it. They found their niche. And they love and live in that niche, which is great. So thanks to you, thanks to Christopher, and thanks to that whole cadre of people who are feeding you suggestions and bugs and all that stuff. So huge amounts of gratitude to that. Of course, gratitude to the fans in general. And because it is today, it's December. What the heck is today? December 5th. Within a couple of hours before we started this show, we found out that Kirstie Alley passed away. So thanks to her for her life lived and for all the characters that she brought on, including Savik. There's certainly plenty of other characters. She was on Cheers and all that other stuff. So just a life lived for her. Gratitude to her. And I think that covers it for me.
All right. For those of you who don't realize either, just so you know, myself, BC, and Jim have talked a lot online and in social media forums. This is actually our first time all talking and meeting each other. So BC, it was so nice to meet you finally.
Awesome.
Face-to-face.
Likewise. Although I feel like you guys are old friends because I see you all the time. I'm a big fan of your show.
I'm so grateful to hear that. Thank you.
All right, great. Well, until next time, IDIC.
Live long and prosper. Be safe. Be well. Take care. We'll talk to y'all soon.
Bye-bye.